Supposedly, America is supposed to be the place where the chief cornerstone will reside. In America, meaning the place of freedom and liberty and justice for all, where intellectual, spiritual freedom is to be set free, and we're to, America was supposed to be the example to the world of what spiritual and intellectual freedom, so that the whole world would know that you come to America to be free and seek out wisdom and knowledge and climb the pyramid of success, of intellectual, spiritual enlightenment. That's what it was supposed to be. Of course, the banks moved in, and now just make it a business.
But how come that picture you showed of the pyramid, the real pyramid from Giza?
Yeah.
It's kind of not like...
It's not a point.
It's not a point.
That's right.
Missing.
The chief cornerstone that the builders rejected. The idea is that somebody took the pyramid point off. The pyramid, the builders rejected. So the whole idea is that the builders, whoever they were, rejected the point on the pyramid. Well, if you look in the reference work of the Bible, you'll see that builders is another word for Masonic order. The builders, they're rejected the pinnacle or the cornerstone. And that's why it sits above the pyramid. Incidentally, did you know that Charles Taze Russell, the founder of Jehovah's Witnesses, or actually he founded an organization called the ISBA, International Bible Students Association. International Bible Students Association was founded by Charles Taze Russell in 1879. When he died in 1916, he died on Halloween night at exactly 12 midnight. Halloween night at 12 midnight, he passed away. He told Menton Sturgeon, was the man who was assigned to travel with Charles Taze Russell. His name was Menton Sturgeon. He was assigned by the Watchtower Society to travel with the old man, Charles Taze Russell. And Charles Taze Russell had been visiting in October his personal home in San Diego and was on his way back to Philadelphia on a train, and as it went through Texas, the Watchtower Society said, as it went through Texas, one evening, which was Halloween night, Charles Taze Russell got up from his room and came out and told his traveling companion, Menton Sturgeon, "Make me a toga. I am about to die. I will die tonight. Make me a toga." And a toga is a Roman cloth that you wrap around and throw over your shoulder, and it's called a toga. Togas were used by the ancient Romans as a symbol. And so Menton Sturgeon, the Watchtower said, Menton Sturgeon quickly got sheets from the beds and put them together and tied them around the old man and threw it over his shoulder and helped him up. And he said, "Tonight I am going to die." And he wanted everyone to see him die in a toga. And I thought, very interesting. You know what a toga means to Freemasons? Very interesting stuff, I think. So consequently, he died at exactly midnight, Halloween night. I thought, isn't that interesting? He dies on the eve of All Hallows, on the Celtic New Year. What does all of that mean? Very interesting. Have you ever seen the tombstone of Charles Taze Russell in Pittsburgh? I have. I've been there. His tombstone is about 8 foot, 9 foot high. It's a pyramid with the capstone on it. That's the tombstone of Charles Taze Russell. The pyramid, the capstone, Charles Taze Russell, the International Bible Students, the Watchtower Society, when it was founded, always taught that Jesus was the chief cornerstone, the triangle on top of the pyramid. Well, at least he had that right. At least he had that one right. For sure, he was right. The chief cornerstone is the symbol of Messiah. And that's what the Watchtower preached from day one, that Jesus was the triangle, the pinnacle of the temple, He was the symbol for the Messiah, is the pyramid of Egypt. And consequently, that whole study became known as pyramidology, and he started David Davidson and so many of the other pyramidologists who really started thinking and studying it, because Charles Taze Russell was a very, very important man in the 1870s and 1880s, and people respected him. And if Charles Taze Russell said that the pyramid had something to do with Christ, well, it must be, so they started doing research on it. So Charles Taze Russell was one of the first people not the very first, but one of the first people to publicly start talking about the chief cornerstone being the pinnacle of the pyramid. And my question to Jehovah's Witnesses has always been two questions. One, Jehovah's Witnesses today will teach you that no one was picked to be God's chosen people until 1914. They say that God has not picked anyone to be his servants on earth until 1914. That's when Jesus comes into his possession of his kingdom. And then Jesus sits down and will pick who he wishes on the earth to be his servants, but not until 1914. Well, if that is true, which the Watchtower Society says is true, then the Watchtower also says over and over that Charles Taze Russell was led in his work by Jehovah's Spirit. Jehovah God picked Charles Taze Russell in 1879 and led him and gave him his spirit and directed him. Well, how can you talk about that Jesus didn't pick anyone until 1914 if Jehovah's already picked him back in 1879? That means that God's playing favorites here. He tells the world, oh no, Jesus hasn't come into his power until 1914, and so then Jesus will pick his people. No, God picked Charles Taze Russell, you said, back in 1879. So you're just playing favorites here, huh? Well, and then the second question I have is that, all right, let us assume that Jehovah picked Charles Taze Russell, which I don't believe, but let us assume that Jehovah, the God of the universe in Hebrew, picked Charles Taze Russell in 1879 to be the great teacher of his work. Well, then how come, I would say to Jehovah's Witnesses, how come when Charles Taze Russell died Halloween night, 1916, that 2 years later, when Judge Rutherford became the second president of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, Charles Taze Russell died, his successor became president of the Watchtower Society, and what was the first official act that the new president did? He took everything the Watchtower Society had been teaching, all garbage, got rid of it, cleaned it out. We got a whole understanding. All of that is a stuff that doesn't mean nothing. And so he wiped out everything from 1879 to 1916 to the night Charles Taze Russell died. Judge Rutherford wiped it all out in one foul swoop and said the whole thing is all a bunch of malarkey. Now I've got the real truth. Here's the real truth. And Charles Taze Russell was a good man. He did the best he could, but he didn't know from beans. So I'm saying, no, wait a minute. You mean Jehovah picked Charles Taze Russell back in 1879, and God's Spirit was on Charles Taze Russell, and the next president comes in and says the whole thing is a bunch of malarkey, didn't exist, it's all a bunch of silliness. Well, what does that say about you then? You're taking over the position of an organization that's built on a bunch of silliness, right? So consequently, Jehovah's Witnesses, like most cults, and they are, incidentally, they are referred to as York Rite cults in Masonry. York Rite cults. This is why the Watchtower Society moved to New York. New York is the old York, England, and the presence of the Knights Templars of old York, England moved into America and called it New York. And they called New York the Empire State. Why? Because it's the state of the New York Rite Masonic Empire coming out of York, England, and establishing their filthy, dirty system in our beloved country in New York. There is nothing dirtier or filthier on the earth, in my present opinion, than New York City. It's only topped by the Vatican. The entire Vatican, banking, York Rite, Masonic banking system, somebody needs to do their homework. Charles Taze Russell was financed out of London, England. The money was coming out of MI5 and MI6. The Mormon Church, Seventh-day Adventist, the Worldwide Church of God, all of these are referred to as York Rite cults, financed, organized, directed out of London. Something's going on here. Again, that's a whole subject for another day. I could do 3 hours just on that one study alone of the symbolism in the York Rite cults of America. The Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Worldwide Church of God, Jehovah's Witnesses, they're all being financed by the same people. Thank you. Go on now.
Mr. Maxwell, can you tell us what the toga means in Freemasonry? You mentioned it, what it means in Roman, but can you mention what it means in Freemason?
Well, the toga was a symbol of a very highly spiritual man who God had used in the Roman Empire. The toga was a symbol in the Roman Empire of a prophet, a great holy man who had been used by God to inaugurate some great new era, some new dispensation. And that's why I think that's interesting, that pyramid on the dollar bill, the Novus Ordo Seclorum, as the new order of the ages, the new world order. I am just telling you that that symbol, New World Order, on the dollar bill is a huge, enormous subject, which I have been working on for some 25 years. And one day I'm going to be able to put it into an 8-hour presentation where I show all of the words, the terms, the symbols of the new order, where it comes from, tying all of the secret societies and occult orders of the world behind the Knights Templars, bringing in what is referred to as the New Age or the New Order. It's an incredible story you are not going to believe. I will give you some tips real quick. Think about this. The high priest of the Sanhedrin in the ancient Jewish system, and the Sanhedrin was like our Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court in the Jewish system of things, which up until recently, up until 1948, was in Europe. In Europe, there was a court for the Jews, a world court for Jews in Europe. It changed and went directly to the state of Israel when Israel was set up in 1948. The Sanhedrin moved to Israel. But in the Sanhedrin, or the highest Jewish court in the world, the high priest of the Sanhedrin, or what we would call the chief magistrate of the court, in Hebrew is called a Nasi, N-A-S-S-I, or N-A-S-I. Look it up in a dictionary. N-A-S-I is the high priest of the Sanhedrin in Israel. But you will find that the Hebrew word N-A-S-I, Nasi, for the high priest of the high court of Jews, in Anglo-Saxon, look it up in a dictionary, will tell you it's correctly spelled in Anglo-Saxon, N-A-Z-I. Now we're talking Nazi. Nazi, Nazi, yes, it goes back to a root word, Naza, N-A-Z-A. Naza gives us the word Nazarite, Nazareth. No, Nazareth, there was no Nazareth in Jesus' day. We have to assume that Jesus would be born in the 1st century. But in the first 250 years, there was no Nazareth. Nazareth only came into existence in the 3rd century under the Roman Empire. So consequently, Jesus could not have been from Nazareth. There was no Nazareth. But there was a priesthood called the Nazarites, N-A-Z-A-R-I-T-E. But Naza, N-A-Z-A, Naza is connected to a root word, Mazza, M-A-Z-Z-A, Mazza, which gives us Mazaroth. Mazaroth is a Jewish word for the zodiac. Now Mazaroth, the zodiac, is connected to Naza, or the Nazarites. Naza is connected to Nazi, N-A-S-I, the god of the zodiac, which gives us N-A-Z-I, Nazis. And we know that Hitler was heavily involved in the study of the zodiac and ancient occultism. Steven Spielberg has him, and George Lucas have Indiana Jones looking for the lost ark of the Jews' lost ark, and he has Adolf Hitler looking for the lost ark. Why? Why does Hitler want the lost ark? Because it's Jewish. Because it's Nazi. It's because it's Nazi. It's a symbol. Then in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it has Sean Connery and Indiana Jones looking for the Christian symbol, which is the cup of the Grail, the Holy Grail. And where do they find the Holy Grail? They find the Holy Grail in the city of Petra, which is in the country of Jordan. Go back and rent the movie and ask yourself, why would a man like Steven Spielberg, who is no fool, I know the research department at SKG, I've been there, I know their research department at the studio. They are very astute in what they do. Steven Spielberg makes no mistakes in his movie. He knows what he's doing. And when he has Indiana Jones and Sean Connery, his father, finding the most important symbol of Christianity itself, the Holy Grail, the cup of Christ, they find it in the temple of Petra, which is in the country of Jordan. You say, wait a minute, what is Steven Spielberg telling us? And who was looking for that cup of the Christ if it wasn't Adolf Hitler? Hitler's looking for it too. There's something going on here between Jewish, between Masonic, between Christianity, between Nazism. There's something huge going on the world scope that most people can't even begin to realize what the name of the tune is. There's something big coming down, and it's coming soon. And the high priest of Judaism, they know what the name of the tune is. The Steven Spielbergs, the international banking cartels out of London, out of America, they know what the symbolism means. We are up against something you have no idea in the world how big it is, and it's been coming for a long time, and when it gets here, you are not going to believe what's coming on the face of the earth. These people mean business, and they are going to conquer the world, and bloodshed will be all over the world, and they're going to do it in the name of their God. And they're using the symbols coming out of Egypt, and I'm telling you, what we are faced in this country, what the Americans are facing today, you have no idea in the world who these people really are and what they're really doing. And it's all been there in symbols and emblems in the Bible and the research materials, all of it's there. The priest of Judaism, they know what it is. The rabbis know, Simon Wiesenthal knows. It's just the poor Americans who haven't got the faintest idea in the world. We're just watching Bugs Bunny and Channel 7 News, that's all we know.
Is the bloodshed going to be caused because of the overpopulation of the earth? We had 6 billion in the year 2000. We'll have 9 billion in the year 2050.
Yeah, you have to appreciate what I'm saying, though, is that somebody else is in charge, not humans. Somebody else is in charge on this earth, and they're not human.
Yeah, they don't
But they're
care
here.
for us. I've heard that we are the aliens, these reptiles living under the earth are the earthmen.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I personally, it's my personal belief now, I personally believe that there are reptile aliens here. But that's just my personal belief. It has nothing to do with the fact that David Icke talks about it, because I'm the one that brought David Icke to America. So I believe that before I ever met David Icke. I personally believe that we're talking that the idea that there are reptile aliens here, it's just a belief. But I personally believe that that's true, and I have my reasons. I don't, off the top of my head, say I believe something just because it sounds good to me. No, I have a reason for saying it. I've done a lot of homework on that subject. Yeah, that's...
You said something changed during the first, well, I guess, you know, to me, the Bible is very truthful. We had the first ecumenical council in the year 326.
Yeah.
Under
Ecumenical Council, yeah, it's called the Council of Nicaea in Turkey.
So they changed it. There used to be one more, the Bible, at least the whole Old Testament, and maybe Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John had been written by that time in 326. Not Emperor
You
Julian.
know why there are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
Yeah.
It's because of 12 apostles. You have to have 4 Gospels if you're going to have 12 apostles. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you catch what I just said?
I couldn't catch it all.
Okay, let me run it by you again. The reason why you have 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is because you have 12 apostles.
Yeah, they talk about Jesus.
Is anyone following what I just said? Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah, okay. The 12 apostles represent, as I said, the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 months of the year. This is why you had 12 jurors in a jury system. The 12 jurors helped God's Son to bring the truth to light with the light of truth. The 12 brothers of Joseph, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 symbols on the breastplate of the high priest, the 12 represented the 12 signs of the zodiac. That's why the sun and the first day of, and that's why Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, spring, summer, autumn, winter. We're talking about astrological symbolism.
But those are 4 men that wrote about Jesus.
Well, I'm just saying there are 4 different books in the Bible, and the reason why is they have many books, but Tertullian, one of the early church fathers who chose the books to be put into the Bible, said you can only have 4. Pick your 4 best, because you're only going to have 4. Why? You've got many, many books that could be put into the Bible, but Tertullian said you only have 4, so pick 4. And the reason why Tertullian said, because the 4 books of the Bible, the 4 books of the Gospel, will represent the 4 seasons of the year. This is why when Leonardo da Vinci painted the Last Supper shows Jesus sitting in the middle, and you will see 3 the apostles talking to each other, 3 apostles talking to each other, 3 group and 3 group. They're groups in threes, 4 groups, 2 on each side of Jesus. Yeah, spring, summer, autumn, winter. The 3 months of winter, the 3 months of autumn, the 3 months of summer, and the 3 months of spring. The 12 are the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 months of the year. And the 12 are dominated by God's Son, the light of the world, who brings light and intellectual, spiritual enlightenment into the world. That's why he's called God's Son, the light of the world. So what I'm saying is that Jesus is a metaphor, a symbolic metaphor for spiritual, intellectual enlightenment.
You were talking earlier, like the New Testament was written around 1100 BC, AD, and during the First Crusade, and I'm going to continue. Maybe the King James Version was written for stuff that was started in 1100 AD.
You know why the King James Version is called the Authorized Version? It's because it was the one authorized by King James for you to read. He didn't tell you to go reading something he didn't tell you to read. And if he catches you reading something he didn't tell you to read and it's not authorized, you know, it's going to be your head. He didn't authorize you to read something he didn't tell you. Who translated the King James Authorized Version? Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Yeah, and once you understand, wait a minute, the Bible is a Masonic book. Of course it's a Masonic book. And consequently, when you begin to understand what is Masonry, well, Masonry is the building of bricks. And that's consequently when you graduate from high school or graduate from college or university, you wear a square mortarboard. The square mortarboard is a mortarboard, and once we get on theology and religion, my God, this is a wonderful subject. How many people know that the symbols in Islam are taken directly out of the Old Testament Bible? And that Mecca is the black cube of Freemasonry. Mecca is a black square. It's called the black cube. The Islamics call it the black cube. The Jews call it the black square.
It's also a city where...
Yeah, Mecca, yeah, but I'm saying that the most important symbol in Islam is a square building and it's covered with black. Why? Because it's the black cube. What does a black cube mean? Look it up. The planet Saturn. Saturn was referred to as the black cube, the black square. This is why when the judge walks into the courtroom, everyone rises. Why? Because he's wearing a black robe. The black robe is the priest of Saturn. The black cube, he's went to college, university, the square black robe, the square black cube. connects to the black robe of judges. This is why Catholic priests wear black robes, Jewish rabbis, black robes. You graduate from university and college, you wear black robes. Why? A black robe represents the ancient Jewish god, the Hebrew god, Saturn. Saturn was the god of the law. He was the inhibitor. Saturn was always the god who inhibits. He holds you back. The law will put you in jail. It'll teach you a lesson. You slow down. You back up and show respect, because Saturn was the god of the black robe. He is the inhibitor who holds you back. So the ancient Phoenician Canaanite people, who we today call Jews, they were actually Phoenicians, the ancient Phoenician people said, well, since Saturn holds you back, and his name in the ancient Phoenician language, Saturn, was El, E-L. The house of El was a Temp El, so Jews still go to Temp El today. When do they go to Temp El? They go to on Saturn's day. You see the Jews going with the yarmulke, the Catholic yarmulke, going to Temp El today to worship the planet Saturn. Saturn was the inhibitor. That's why they don't do anything on Saturday. It's called the Shabbat or Sabbath. Look it up in a dictionary. You will find that Saturn was referred to as Shabbat. Shabbat becomes an Anglo-Saxon Sabbath. So the Sabbath was the worship of the planet Saturn, Lord of the Rings. They're still making movies about the God of the Jews, Lord of the Rings in Hollywood. Wake up and get a life and understand that there's an enormous amount of occult hidden knowledge, that the masters who manipulate banks and governments around the world, these guys are brilliant with their stuff. In the old ancient system we call the Druidic system in Northern Europe and England, the Druids were very high priests. They were very powerful high priests. I've said this before. One of the most important symbols of the ancient Druidic religion, the ancient Druids, was the magic wand. Merlin the Magician with his magic wand. Remember Mickey Mouse with his magic wands were always made out of the wood of a holly tree. It was made out of Hollywood. They're still doing their magic in Hollywood, and we don't even understand what the word means. Hollywood is the wood of a holly tree. Holly is important to the Celtic Druids at Christmas time. Holly, wood. The magic of Hollywood. It's Druidic, Jewish, Masonic symbolism. And then you begin to understand why MGM, finally it begins to dawn on you, why MGM has the roaring lion. That's right, the roaring lion is the sun in the constellation that begins summer. Summer begins in Leo, the constellation of Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. The Lion King. He is king over the northern hemisphere and over the earth and over Europe. And the first day of summer, which is in the constellation of Leo. He's the Lion King. They still make movies about it. The Lion King is Leo, the sun, who dominates the world in the constellation of Leo. Consequently, for 3 months, he moves southward until he crosses the equator. And at the time he crosses the equator, he now becomes Scorpio. It's Scorpio brings what we call the fall. We bring fall in. Fall is the sun which was standing straight, and now he is falling. And he's falling so fast that he's just fell across the equator, and now he's going southward all the way down till he dies in Capricorn. He will die in Capricorn on December 22nd, which is the day of the winter solstice. And for 3 days, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, the sun does not move. And the United States Navy will show you that the sun does not move it does not move further south, and it does not come back north either. It comes up on the same exact degree for 3 days, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. On the 25th, it moves 1 degree. The U.S. Navy will tell you it moves 1 degree northward, which means it's come back to life, and now it's going to begin its annual journey coming back to us to bring spring. Because he was dead, now he's springing back to life. He's going to come back to life, and as he crosses over the equator, the ancient Egyptians said when you died, you crossed over. So consequently, you passed over from this life to the next. And we still say today, when someone dies, grandmother passed last night, grandfather passed away, or they passed on. But always the word is past, which means death. Therefore, the son which died in winter, which was dead for 3 days and reborn on December 25th, has come back to life, and as it crosses the equator, we say he has passed over from the death of winter to the new life of spring. And the ancient Egyptians, 1,000 years before Hebrews ever existed, worshipped something called the Passover. The Passover is simply the sun passing over the equator, coming back to the northern hemisphere to again become the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And when it passes over the equator on the Passover, and the ancient Egyptian calendar was in the constellation of Virgo, so God's son is born of a virgin, and he becomes King of Kings and of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Virgo is one of the constellations of spring. Wake up. The entire thing is astrotheology. Why is it that Judas went out to kiss Jesus? Remember when the authorities were wanting to arrest him, and Judas went out and kissed Jesus? And Christians will tell you, well, Judas went out to kiss Jesus to identify him. Logic alone will tell you that's ludicrous. You're not talking about Jesus living in a town like the south of Chicago. We're not talking about L.A., down in like Santa Monica. We're talking about a little Mickey Mouse fruitcake city and the ancient Roman Empire that you could walk across in 15 minutes. A little tiny little Mickey Mouse town in the Middle East where everybody knows everybody. There's only 300 people in the whole city to start with, and everybody knows everybody. So why would you need a man to go out and kiss another man in public to identify? It doesn't say that. They already knew who he was. Even the Caesar in Rome knew who he was. They don't care where he is. They know where he is. There's only 300 people in the town. Everybody knows where he is. He's out there in the garden at Gethsemane. We know where he is. Well, then what are you going out kissing a man? What's you got one man going out and kiss another one? It doesn't. It's because the Bible doesn't say that Judas went out to kiss Jesus to identify. It says he went out and kissed him to betray him, not identify. What are you talking about? It's because Scorpio, the first constellation of fall, is a scorpion. And in the Middle East, when a scorpion bites you, unlike North America, scorpions have two stingers, one on top of the other. When they sting you in the Middle East, they're deadly. So the ancient Egyptians and the ancient peoples in the Middle East said that you just got the kiss of death. They just kissed you off. So consequently, the cut on the skin when a scorpion bites you looks like human lips. And the ancient people said you got the kiss of death. So therefore, God's son, who was really hot, yeah, he's hot because he's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's the most powerful presence of God's son is in summer. But now he is falling. And in the first week of fall, Scorpio gives God's son the kiss of death. And now he will go to his death in winter, and he will die for 3 days. And on December 25th, he will be born again and come back over the equator. And we celebrate today the Passover. And it just by chance happens in the first week of spring. And of course, Christians will then say, well, yeah, but that's a Jewish holiday. And it's all right, but it's a Jewish holiday. We don't have nothing to do with that. So we will say that God's son is resurrected. Let's say that. He's come back to life. I don't give a damn what you call it. You're coming back to life, passing over, coming back to... What are you talking about? Yeah, the son's coming back to life. So it's the resurrection. What do you mean resurrection? Yeah, the thing is resurrected. It was dead in the winter, now it's coming back in the spring. If you want to understand this, very simple. On the first day of spring, or the 2 weeks before spring, go to all the go to all the cards, the companies that sell greeting cards. Go to any of the big greeting card companies, and you will see the Passover. Go look at all the Passover cards that the Jews send each other. They all say the same thing: the Passover, the coming of spring, The Passover. God is bringing back the sun for spring, and we should all be happy. And so, what is going on here? Even the Jews, even the greeting cards are telling you, this is just spring. It's just a Passover. Come on, give me a break here. It's an incredible when you understand what the name of this tune is. We talk about Yahweh. People use the word Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh. You know what Yahweh means in Hebrew? Has anybody ever even bothered to look what the word Yahweh means? Let me tell you what Yahweh means. If you take a hose and bend the hose at the nozzle and turn on the water, you feel the power building up, the pressure building up. When you release the hose, the water does not pour out, it blows out. Why? Because it was under pressure, kinetic energy. It was under pressure, ready to be released. And therefore, when you release the hose, it blows out. Blowing out, or the release of dynamic energy, and the Latin is damus, or dunamis. It goes back to the word, and our word, dynamite. Dynamite is a releasing of dynamic energy, damus. Is a release of energy. Damas comes from the word Yahweh. It can be traced back to Yahweh. Yahweh was the sex act, the male releasing his creative father's image into the female was called Yahweh. This is why Jewish astronomers tell us that the universe came into existence through a big bang. And I'm saying, why doesn't somebody wake up and do their homework and find out? As I talk to the rabbis, and they say, yeah, okay, so what? Yeah. And I asked rabbis, I said, is it true? I mean, tell me the truth. Was there an Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Was there a Moses and King Solomon? And the highest ranking rabbi, this is back in 1965, in Newton, Massachusetts, head of the American Rabbinical Association, or whatever it was, he says to me on the phone, look, he says, the Bible's just a story. It's called the greatest story ever told. It's a story. Wake up. It's just a story. But it's an encoded, metaphysical story. It's an encoded, symbolic story that's telling you something. And you ain't getting it yet. Because remember, there's only two kind of people in the world. Those who get it and those who don't. And most people, they don't get it. And that's why we're crawling on our knees in America and trying to stay alive while our masters are raping this country and raping us, is because we don't get it yet. We don't understand the symbols and the words and the terms and how this stuff works. You know, they have something called the celebration of spring, as I said. The celebration of spring in the Phoenician Canaanite system. Today we call it Israel and Lebanon. But Israel and Lebanon, thousands of years ago, was referred to as Cana. And so they had the celebration of spring in Cana, just the way they had the celebration of spring everywhere. They had the celebration of spring everywhere. We do too. And consequently, there was a spring, they call the celebration of spring in the land of Cana, they called it the marriage feast of Cana. So God's son is at the marriage feast of Cana. Wake up. It's a symbol, you know, and so what is it? What is the symbolism telling us? The marriage feast of Cana was quite simply Mother Earth, Mother Nature, as God's son to draw water. That's what it does, it draws water. So it can rain on the grapes, and we smash the grapes and make wine, so we turn water into wine. Wake up. It's a symbolism for summer, for spring. This is why, but you cannot have, understand, you cannot have God the Father. This is why we have the idea of God the Father. Why does God always have to be the Father? Obvious, because in the ancient Hindu religion, God the Father was referred to his name. Check it out in the dictionary. The name of the ancient God of the Father, the male deity in ancient India, was called Rain, R-A-I-N. That was his name. So when we have rain, no, that's the name of God the Father in Hindu. And God the Father came at the spring to impregnate Mother Earth with the sacred fluid, and he would impregnate Mother Earth. But you can't have God the Father impregnating Mother Earth unless you have a wedding. You have to have a celebration of the wedding between God the Father and Mother Earth, Mother Nature, bringing forth new life. So consequently, if you want to be born again, you have to go out into your mother's water, because your mother's water broke and you came out, you were born. Now you need to go back into your mother's water and be born again. That's what baptism is. Being baptized means you're being born again. The bottom line on all of this is that it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Come on, this is what... It's really quite a story when you begin to see that this is what we call religion. And it's been given to us by the Knights Templars and the great Masonic masters of the world, and we have bought it, hook, line, and sinker. But there is a spiritual presence in this universe that men have called God. There is a very powerful presence in this universe, and it is demanding intellectual and spiritual enlightenment. That's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is to cause people to awaken to the fact that there are so many things we don't know about theology, religion, the Bible, what the stories are, what the symbols mean. It's really quite a story. And I believe, in closing, if you, and I said this to a young lady I was talking to earlier, if you are sound asleep and you are very comfortable and you're very tired, you're sound asleep, total darkness, someone slips into your bedroom and turns on a 600-watt bulb next to you, your first and normal reaction is going to be to turn away. Why? Because the light hurts your eyes, and you're not ready for that much light. So actually you turn away. Why? The same is true symbolically when someone who is intellectually and spiritually enlightened, we call that person brilliant. This guy is brilliant. That person is brilliant, meaning they're filled with light, intellectual, spiritual enlightenment. But most people who live in the dark, they can't handle it. I don't want to hear this stuff. This is what we call cognizant dissonance, meaning, I've never heard this before. This is bull. I don't want to hear it. It hurts my eyes. Why? Because you can't handle the truth. You can't handle spiritual light. So therefore, you turn away. Well, when someone who is spiritually enlightened is trying to teach you something and enlighten you, what are you doing? You are listening to that person. But as you're listening to him, what are you doing? You are judging in your brain, in your mind, if this guy is for real, or is he just a good showman, or is he full of bull, or is it true? And so you are judging. This is why the scripture says Jesus was held to be judged in the temple. That's right, the temple, the side of your head. And when you decide that you've heard enough of this and you don't want to hear any more of this light, you want to go back to sleep, you don't want to hear this light, what have you done? You have now put God's Son to death, the Son of enlightenment, the intellectual, spiritual light from the universe you have now put to death in your head. Why? Because that's where God's Son dies, Golgotha, skull place, in your head. Skull place, that's where he's put to death. The bottom line is that the entire New Testament is a metaphor for the war between light and darkness. And most people can't handle the light. They can't handle the truth. It's too bright, and I don't want to hear this. Well, one day there will come a time when the real truth is going to come out, and you're going to find out that that presence of God bears no resemblance to what you thought it was going to be. God is bigger than any one religion. That divine presence in the universe is getting ready to make its move on the earth. We are merely the offspring of a race of people that have been here for hundreds of thousands of years, and that divine presence in the universe we call God, I believe, is getting ready to do something momentous. It's frightening in its implications. So you need to get prepared, because you're going to find out the truth is not what you thought it was. It's bigger than that. Again, let me thank you for my spieling, and I'll take you some questions again.
Okay,
I could talk about
Jordan,
this for 8 hours. Go on.
Jordan, as you know, this is Halloween week, and on the satanic calendar, they call for more human sacrifices by the Druids and their followers around the world than any other time of the year.
Yeah, you know, they'd also do
Halloween and a little bit about what your knowledge of this is. I've got a flyer over here. A report shows the 5 days of human sacrifices this week, including November 1st.
I don't know if you know this, but they still have child sacrifice up here in the hills. You know they kill children up here in the hills, the Hollywood Hills off of Coldwater? Do you know that?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't be surprised.
They
I think
still
it
do
happens in every county in America, you know.
Yeah.
But do you know the location?
Yeah, I know the location.
I'll talk to you about that later.
No, I'm not going to talk about it at all. Anyway,
you know, the bottom line is that people need, because we're in spiritual warfare, you
right.
know, we don't even know what to fight about,
That's
what to pray
exactly
about,
right.
because our clergy won't tell us the truth. What's
we are
going
in
on.
a spiritual war, and we have no idea in the world what's going on. You know, your decisions in life are only as good as your information. If your information is faulty, you're going to lose. And that's why I believe all over this country, Christians and Jews are losing. Christians are losing. Oh, I'm not talking about the channel, the 700 Club and all the multimillionaires who couldn't believe, they don't believe in any of this. They're just a show. It's just, you can tell this is all a show. They're out there with their little effeminate hairdos and their diamond rings, and they're singing and praising the Lord, while the masters of our world are ripping the human race apart. They're planning something big. And we got these fascist Nazis who call themselves Christians looking the other way while people dying all around the world, why they feed their belly and have their girlfriends in the motels, and they're not telling the people the real truth. Somewhere along the line, what goes around comes around. And there's going to come a time when this country is going to wake up and find out we've been had. And don't, like the scripture says in Isaiah, and I love that scripture, it says, when what you dread, God says to Israel in Isaiah, when what you dread comes upon you as a pangs of distress upon a pregnant woman, do not call out to me, for I will not allow myself to be found, because you have preached for your doctrines the commandments of men. I love that. When what you dread, and you know it's coming, we know we're moving, this whole country, this whole world is moving into some dark times. We know it's coming. And the scripture says in Isaiah, when it finally gets here, and you know it's coming, and when it gets here, don't call out to me, because I will not be found. Why? You haven't wanted the truth. You wanted your own religion. You wanted your own religious beliefs. Well, now you got your religious beliefs. See what it's going to do, what the Nazis have taken over your country. And this is why Jews were marching to concentration camps in Adolf Hitler's Germany. Where was God? The scripture says, don't call out to me. You never have loved the truth. You've always been looking to take care of yourself. You don't care about truth. So don't call me when they come for you. And when Christians are being persecuted, the same scripture applies. Don't come to me. Don't call out to me. You got the truth and you love the Lord. You don't love truth. No way. Hey, what goes around comes around. You turned your back on truth a long time ago. And so consequently, I'm saying that I believe this is the time in which the world is now entering into what is called a new dispensation. A new dispensation means the whole world is going to wake up and find out what's really happening. And when it does, it's going to be far too late. I'm telling you, what we're facing and coming in this country, and ultimately, remember, what happens in America happens around the globe. And it's on its way. And Christians are losing, the Jews are losing. And we are always talking about the Jewish conspiracy and the Jewish, no, the Jews are not behind any of this. This is all Gentiles. It's been Gentile from day one. The Romans were not Jews. The Romans were Caesars. They put to death Jews. The Romans were the most powerful families and the most powerful ruling bodies in the world. And the Vatican represents the real powers of this world, not Jewish at all. The Jewish yarmulke, that's a Catholic symbol, not Jewish. So you need to understand that if there's a conspiracy going on, it's Rome. If there's ever been a truth on this earth, the Vatican is behind the demise of America and the whole world. All you've got to do is look at Washington, D.C., and understand that Caesar the seat of power for the Roman Empire was called Capitol Hill. And that's why we today have a Capitol Hill. And the word capital is a Latin word for money. And always money had a dome. It's called domus. It's the power, dynamite, domus, the power of money. And consequently, that's why our capital has a dome, the Capitol Dome. And under the domus, you have the Senate, the United States Senate. No, the Roman Senate. And on both sides of the presidential podium where the president stands to give his State of the Union message, on both sides are 8-foot-high fasces, a bundle of sticks with a hatchet head. They are Roman symbols for world fascism, the symbol for world totalitarian dictatorship coming directly out of the Vatican. The Vatican symbols in the Vatican are bundle of sticks tied in the cross of St. Andrew, crisscross, crisscross, and have a hatchet head at the top. And those are called fasces. They represent Vatican Roman domination of the world. Jews ain't running the world. Vatican's running the world. They've used the Jews like they've used everybody else. No, I'm not stupid. Like Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people some of the time and all the people some of the time. You can't fool everybody all the time. I came in a long time ago knowing who the real culprits are, and they're not Jews. It's the Vatican. And our symbols in Washington, D.C., of the United States Senate with the fascist symbolism, world fascism. What we've got here is the takeover and the destruction of our republic by the Catholic Church. And that's why nothing's going to be done to save America, because the people will never, ever buy it. The people will never accept that the Holy Father has plans for you. Never, the people will never figure it out. The Holy Father has plans for the whole world. He's the Holy Father. I don't know if you know this or not, but the Vatican signed a contract with King John in England. I think it was in the 12th century. In the 12th century, a contract was drawn up and signed by the Pope and King John, where it was said that God created the earth and all life on it, and that God, according to the scriptures, gave the earth and all life on it to Jesus, his son. And so therefore Jesus is the owner of not only the earth but all life on it. But since Jesus is not here right now, he's busy elsewhere, somebody has to take care of the possession of the property. So consequently, the Pope, obviously, he would be the right one to do it. And if you got a problem with that, he'll cut your head off. So consequently, the Pope became known as the Vicar of Christ. The Vicar of Christ, vicar is a Latin word for someone who stands in for. So he's standing in for Jesus. And consequently, he will give over the whole kingdom of the world to Jesus when he comes back. But he ain't here yet. And since he's not here yet, the Pope will run the world. But the Pope, of course, is the Holy Father. He's a very wonderful and holy man, and he doesn't have time to run the world. So there was a contract made where he put the whole world and all life in it into a, what's the word, Jason, for the law, the legal term? Trust. Puts it into a trust. He puts the earth and all life into a trust, and then he makes the King of England the head of that trust. And so consequently, all the world will come under the British domination for the Vatican, because the Vatican has nothing to do with all this war and bloodshed, kill. They just pay everybody else to do it. This is why the Union Jack flag. The Union Jack flag. Look at the flag of the British flag. You'll see the cross of St. George, and then a crisscross behind it, the cross of St. Andrew. This is why the British have always been called double crossers, because it's a double cross. They are a bunch of double crossers. They've raped Africa, they've raped Asia, they've sold drugs to the opium to the Chinese, they have ripped off, screwed over, left for dead all races and peoples of the world. I love the English people, I love England. I'm not condemning the people, I'm talking about the world dominating secret societies that are behind the British Empire. And the powers behind the British Empire is the Vatican. And if you fly over the Vatican, go on the web and put in Vatican from the air under images, and it will show you the Vatican from above, looking down, and you will see the symbolism of the Vatican. It's all there. The British Union Jack flag in the courtyard. The courtyard is a keyhole, and the key is the key of the cross. The cross is the key to world domination. The symbol for world domination is the British Union Jack flag. It's all there. Go on the web and look under Vatican from the and look at it. There are images, and you will see there's a whole world of occult symbolism sitting there right in front of you. But most people go to the Vatican and they look at all the pretty sights and never suspect why it's called Vatican. They have no idea what the word means in Latin. Again, I love talking about this subject because this is my subject I have lived with for some 43 years. The bottom line on my subject is we've all been had because we don't read, we don't think, we don't study, and consequently our masters don't give a damn about us. There's no difference between black and white, rich or poor. The people who run this world, we're all nothing but slaves. And America was the only place in the world where the hope of personal redemption and personal intellectual, spiritual enlightenment was held out to the world. And now the Vatican, through their international banking houses in Washington, D.C., up on the Hill, Capitol Hill, are planning on raping and destroying our great republic. And who's behind it? The Holy Father. Yes.
Okay, back to the dollar bill and the eye and the top of the pyramid and all of that. So if that does represent God, if that's really a spiritual,
That's precisely right.
Then who put it on the dollar bill? Who designed it? Who, I mean, that's been there for a long time.
That's right.
Okay.
Since 1930s.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's another interesting question.
how did
Who
it
put
get
that
there?
on there?
And if it's really a spiritual representation as opposed to some of the things we've been
Yeah.
told.
Well, actually, the man who was responsible for it being on the dollar bill, ultimately responsible, of course, the president, which was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR.
Third-degree Mason, right?
Huh?
Third-degree Mason.
Yeah, well, they used to joke about him. FDR was fraudulent deficit Roosevelt. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 32nd degree Freemason. But the man who brought, according to the U.S. Booklet that you could get on the national seal, if you go to the United States printing office and get a little booklet on the national symbols and the seal, you will see on the right-hand side of the back of the dollar bill, you will see the American eagle. It's not an American eagle. All the ancient empires of the world used the eagle as their symbol. The Phoenician Canaanites used it, the Hittites used it, all of the ancient Middle Eastern nations used the eagle, the Greeks used it, and the Romans. Of course, you remember the Roman Empire had the eagle. And of course, the eagle was used by Adolf Hitler. The eagle represents the sun, and the sun, the eagle represents the sun, or something called the sun orders. That's a whole story in itself we could get into. But yes, Franklin Roosevelt was the man who was responsible for putting it on, but it was a Secretary of Agriculture who suggested it to Franklin Roosevelt to put it on. And I can't remember his name right now, but it was the Secretary of Agriculture who suggested putting it on. And that man, Secretary of Agriculture, who suggested putting that symbol on the dollar bill, was a known communist. He was a member of the Communist Party, not just the Socialist Party, but he was known at that time for being a communist. So, wait a minute, what is the Communist Party? Why would the communists want a holy symbol like that? Well, what is communism? Where does that come from? Oh, well, now you've got a whole new story to go into. That's the book, Fire in the Minds of Men by James Billington, explains what communism really is and where it really came from and what the symbols actually mean on the Soviet national coat of arms. All of this, I'm telling you, and I'm going to quit now, all of this I say to tell you there's a far bigger story out there than what you know. Yes?
I think I'm still missing something about the stone that the Freemasons rejected.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit so it's clearer to me why they rejected it? Is it symbolic of them rejecting?
First of all, I believe that there is a world of difference between American Freemasonry, which I do not see as evil at all, American Freemasonry, as opposed to British Grand Lodge Masonry. British Masonry, now that's different. That's British Grand Lodge is totally different than American Freemasonry. You see the two at war in movies like Patriot with Mel Gibson. You see the British killing Americans. What we're talking about is British Freemasonry killing American Masons. So this is what you need to go back and get some of these movies about Patriot and conspiracy theory and all of this, and you begin to see Mel Gibson has a lot of things, but stupid ain't one of them. He understands the difference between American Masonry and British Grand Lodge Masonry. I'm frightened to death of British Grand Lodge Freemasonry. It's frightening to me because I know the Pope's behind it, and he scares me. Just looking at that guy, he scares me. Yeah. You go on the web too, I can't remember the word. Nastasha? Yeah, Nastasha, I think it is. Go on my web, and there's a word in there, Nastasha, I think it is. It was the Pope's army in Poland and in the Balkan area of the Balkans, the Catholic Balkans under the Pope, and the Pope's private army were called Nastasha, I think. Nastasha. And go on my web and you'll see the word Nastasha. And you pick it up for me, please. I'm getting so old I can't even bend over. But thank you. But go on the web and look up Nastasha. On my web, it says words to research. And then hit the footnotes and go read about the Catholic Pope's Nastasha. Read about who they really were and how they would take electric saws and cut off children's heads while the priest was standing there. They're cutting children's heads off with electric saws to teach these Protestants who's boss here, and how they would take people and smash their heads and poke their eyes out with spears. That's the Catholic Nastasha. That's the Catholic Church for you. Yeah, go back and read about the Holy Father. There's nothing holy in Rome but the stories. They're full of holes. Are we finished? Good night.